Hi, thank you for tuning in to the Finding Harmony podcast with me, your host, Harmony Slater. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm your host, Harmony, and I am here with my co-host, Russell Case.
Harmony.
Hi.
Our guest today, Jana Wilson.
Yeah.
Evidently, Warner Brothers heard that we were going to have her on the show today.
Oh, yeah.
And they reached out to us. They wanted us to plug the new Barbie film.
Okay, right, because they're not getting enough attendance at the Barbie.
Well, that's how you keep
theaters.
Making money, is you pitch everywhere you can.
Right.
So Warner Brothers has produced a film. It's called Barbie. It was released last month. It says here, Barbie and Ken are having the time of their lives in the colorful and seemingly perfect world of Barbie Land. However, when they get a chance to go to the real world, they soon discover the joys and perils of living among humans. I found this film, we watched it together, extraordinarily Buddhist in point of view.
Yeah.
It felt like they were going through the Four Noble Truths of their entire experience.
Mm-hmm.
There was that point where she, first she leaves the palace and finally experiences the, suffering, old age, and death, and then cycles through the rest of the Noble Truths right after that. I thought it was really impressive. And I think our guest today, Ms. Wilson, Barbie was very important to you in your life, from what I read in your book, Wise Little One, which you very graciously sent to us. And I've been reading. I'm about halfway done. I made it to 1976. It is a
page
turner and a kettle burner. Or I don't know how you say that.
I don't know.
What do you call that book when you
suspenseful?
Pot boiler.
It's
a pot boiler. When I read through it, I was I recognized so many situations. It was like, yep, I've been there. My word, it was every couple of paragraphs I would call out in the kitchen. It's like, Jesus Christ. How did you make it here? I know how I made it here. It was a lot of work. How did you make it here out of very similar circumstances in which we grew up?
Well, thank you guys for having me on the podcast. And I mean, essentially, you mentioned Barbie. You started out with that. I mean, the inner child loves imagination. And so for me, my imaginary world became a place that not only I disassociated from the trauma that was going on around me, but I certainly used that fertile ground of my imagination to manifest the life that I'm living today. So I think it began very early. I do feel that in what I understand of soul ages, I'm a pretty advanced older soul in terms of taking on a lot of karmic debt early on in my childhood. Mm-hmm. I certainly took on a lot, contracted for a lot, because I had something to give, something greater to give. And so my life from the time I was very young has really been focused on, how can I make a difference in the world? And so
I think when kids see a lot of violence and a lot of really poor behavior when their parents, from their parents, like I did as well, I feel like that there is a point, like you're like I just remember these moments as an 7, 8, 9-year-old where I looked around the room and felt, I think I'm the most mature person in this room. And these people are insane, and I'm just going to have to manage the best that I can here and survive the situation.
Absolutely. That was exactly my thinking as well. Like, it didn't take long before I realized that the adults around me weren't adults. I mean, and which really the gift in that was it helped me become more sovereign at a young age. It helped me, really gain autonomy and a connection to spirit. I always say that the greatest gift of my trauma was this really deep connection in the truth, and I talk about it in the prologue when I'm pulled out of my body and awakened.
Yeah. That was an amazing moment. That was yet another moment in your childhood where your father had, with his alcoholism and his violence, had started in on your mom again, and you had run out of the house because your older brother wasn't there to protect you, and then you had this deep mystical experience in nature. I wonder if you could describe that for us, because that's such a phenomenal beginning to your story. Like, where were you in space? Like, what was around you? What happened? How did it feel to the touch?
Yeah, so prior to that experience, later in life, I watched a documentary on near death experience, and my mom was pretty fascinated with it too, Raymond Moody's work. And, but so I had some kind of knowledge of a near death experience. I'm not sure if that's what helped the process. I certainly had an inner resource of connecting to spirit. I'd had mystical experiences, a couple of them before this ever happened. But right before this happened, I don't write about it in the book because in some ways I felt like little Jana felt exploited by sharing too much. So there were things I did withhold, believe it or not. One of them, yeah.
That's hard to believe, but yeah.
Like
Because,
sexual abuse from a cousin, I withheld that.
oh yeah, okay,
She was a female. I didn't really want to put that in the book. But I had suicide ideation right before that being
sure,
pulled out of my body. I was really contemplating taking my mom's Valiums or aspirin or something.
yeah,
I was looking, I'd been searching, where is she keeping things? When you're living in extreme poverty, and I say extreme because my mom would go into such deep depression. We didn't, we had food scarcity, we had family around us that had money and stuff, but my mom being too proud, I don't know what was going on, but she sure never asked for help.
yeah,
So, I just wasn't happy, but I run outside, I'm praying, wringing my hands, God, please save me. And all of a sudden, I felt a lightness, kind of like this feeling of, I wasn't in the body anymore. So I didn't feel heavy. I felt very light and at peace. Like when they say a peace that passes all understanding, that's the type of peace I felt. And then as soon as I started to, become very aware of this, it was happened very fast. I began to kind of look around, and it was as if I was nestled in the galaxy, like in star nebulas and in vapors and just in this really oasis of comfort. And then and I asked in my mind, like, what's happening? Where am I? And it was as if I could see my little body, and I was told that is not your parents. I could hear the fighting. That is not your life. And I could almost see Earth. Like I could see this kind of provincial, southern little oppressed town. And I could see myself standing there, but yet I was aware of everything all around me. And I remember thinking, if I'm dead, I'm good. I want to stay here. And then as soon as I had that thought, I was back in my body.
yeah,
And I lied there in just bliss. I mean, when you have, and I've had, I had one with a teacher of mine from India. I've had these experiences even as an adult when you get what we called in the South was slain in the spirit.
yeah,
Like you're completely, out. And it happened to me with my teacher, Amma, and, as an adult. And when those experiences happen, I think it's almost like an upgrade of the system or something. Like everything becomes different after it, right? You see through different eyes, you perceive differently. Yeah, it's
you know,
it's almost difficult not to go searching for those experiences, right? Because they're pretty
Yeah.
intense.
Harmony both share that tendency towards disassociation, to kind of separate ourselves from the chaos that we grew up in, which was, total. And but I feel like, and maybe I'm just talking extemporaneously, but I feel like there's a way in which, with a spiritual practice, that you can go into that tendency rather than then,
Mm.
shy away from it, and then go deeper and then explore a kind of real fecund spiritual life.
Like disassociating from yourself as a way of
Rather
coping?
than like saying, well, I'm just going to drink and shoot up, I'm going to actually practice meditation, is what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
was about to answer that and say I experience that every day when I meditate. I let go of
Mm-hmm.
my physical body, what time is it, my environment. I no longer associate with my human self, right? I'm completely gone, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
what practice does for you. Eventually, you're able to just release and go into the field, right? The unified
Mm-hmm.
field, the field of infinite possibilities.
Yeah, you said that. That's right in the prologue as well. You thanked your husband, and with you by my side, there are infinite possibilities. Is that something that the two of you talk about that between the two of you? That's an anchor for you.
My teacher, Deepak, that's one of his terms, and he's been my teacher 36 years. I worked for him and trained with him. And it's just, a terminology from Vedanta that I use a lot. Yeah. Because
Okay.
there is infinite possibilities. I mean, we think this is solid wood, my desk, my body, right? We know from quantum physics now that nothing's solid. It appears solid
Right.
because to our senses, right? So there is infinite
Yeah.
possibilities out of the material world. It's 99.11 nines behind the 99, right? Percent
Mm-hmm.
space.
Yeah.
So if we're living in mostly spaciousness, then that's infinite possibilities. It's just soon as the observer, right, we put our attention on something. And
Mhm.
let's face it, most people are putting their attention on what they don't want, our attention, I always say, is our most valuable asset. Because
That's
whatever we
beautiful.
place it on, right, it fertilizes it. And so we want to be placing it on future potential. So when I
Mm-hmm.
say infinite possibilities, I spend, probably about 15, 20 minutes a day in the future. So I time travel, right? I go into my future. I begin to construct it. I see it. I smell it. I hear what people are saying to me. I experience it with all my five senses. Hi, buddy. We got a little visitor back
We got a little
there.
friend back there, just over your
Just
shoulder.
gonna sleep.
I love
Mm.
them. And that's how you manifest, right? We take ourselves to a future potential and experience it. And then, it's, I think it's fascinating because we really make things difficult as
Yeah.
humans. It's kind of like we're committed to the struggle, give me the struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. So much of what you said is bringing up many ideas of some questions to ask you, because I think there's an interesting thing that can happen when you come from suffering, or you've had these experiences of suffering, and then you dive into spiritual practice without actually addressing that inner child, or that
Wound.
wounded, yeah, that core
Yeah.
wound, or the many core wounds that might be there. How
Disemboweling.
And then the spiritual practice acts like maybe a band-aid, or like a
A diversion.
yeah,
A
a bypass.
A
Yeah,
bypass.
like, and so you feel like you're healed, or you're healing, but really you're just kind of repeating the same pattern of escape, or the same pattern of fixing or suffering, or perfectionism, or whatever
Martyrdom.
whatever the pattern is for you, that is trying to make you feel worthy or loved, because you haven't gone in deeper to actually like be with that inner child, or be with that core wound, and integrate it into your presence, into yourself. Is that some of the work that you do with people, or did you have that experience, and like at what point did you kind of see like, oh, I got to go deeper?
Yeah. In my early 20s, I think the birth of my daughter certainly was what catapulted me and kind of crystallized, like, okay,
Mhm.
I want to be a cycle breaker. I don't want to repeat the patterns of my mom and dad. And
Yeah.
so I had started therapy, traditional psychotherapy, and I was in school at the time. I had re-enrolled. I was taking a lot of psychology and child development. And what I kept discovering, I had a very good therapist who did a lot of hypnotherapy. And through hypnotherapy, we were able to get even in an hour to more root cause. And then add on to that the spiritual component. So now I would consider myself, I really practice psychospirituality. So I don't discount, spirituality. I won't work with, say, an atheist. If somebody came to me and said, I have no belief, it's just all random, or whatever, I'm not the teacher for you, so
Right.
find someone else.
Yeah.
Because you are God, like denying that there is a God is denying that you exist. So, it's just not for me. But getting to your question, the root cause, and not to spiritually bypass, because spiritual bypassing is really big, especially in religion and a lot of the spiritual and new age communities, and all just meditate over it. I know some really angry Buddhists,
Sure.
meditate a lot, but they're not unpacking what happened to them in their core wounding. So
Yeah.
my work is really about taking someone back as a hypnotherapist to early developmental trauma, birth to 7. And then sometimes as a regressionist, I also trained with Dr. Brian Weiss, who wrote Many Lives, Many Masters. And that book, as you know, like really changed my life, because that book, you're probably not there in the story yet, though. That book opened me up to just this thought of, what if my soul chose my parents? What if reincarnation is real? Listen, we don't know. We live in a very mysterious universe, right? Like we're on a rock flying through space at 70,000 miles an hour. Like, I mean, it's, and out of the known
Ghosts inhabiting a
universe.
skeleton.
It's pretty weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, meat-coated skeleton suits flying through space. And it's, I think in traditional therapy, my husband's a physician, and really looking at the Western medicine model, we see it's a sick care model. And we're not really addressing, even in psychology, and helping people understand their psyche. Because let's face it, if we taught, and I work with lots of psychotherapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists who come to us for help because they're also very depressed. They're hearing a lot of stories all day. They're not taught to teach people, right? How to heal. They need them coming back. It's the same thing model with like an attorney. You got to run the meter to make the money.
That's right.
It's a broken system, and so if we can get to root cause, and root cause is, beliefs that children form when we're little. We're all emotion. Mom's busy, even if it's not a terrible childhood like mine and adverse childhood experiences. I scored 10 out of 10. Let's just take somebody, right? You guys probably scored pretty high, if not 10 out of 10.
Yeah, about 7 or 8.
Yeah. And so you go, you take this model. Sorry, my dogs are getting a little excited.
That always happens
hear
when we're on
them.
podcasts. Yeah, if we have our second dog down here, they're always fighting.
They're so excited about our talking. It must be something going on.
Energy.
Yeah, they're getting like, woo. So, but what I was going to say, in root cause, when we get to the root cause, we see, like, I think about it like an operating system on a computer. Yeah. So, it's a hard drive, and the hard drive can only use certain software. Well, often people start to have an awakening, and they get on a healing journey, and they're getting software. They go to a meditation retreat. They go to a yoga retreat. They read a book, whatever. And this is new software, but it's not compatible with their hardware. So eventually it falls away and nothing sticks. And this is most of the people I'm working with. I've been to therapy. I've read books. I've attended, and nothing's worked. Well, it's because they haven't gotten to root cause. And root cause is, what are you believing? What did you adopt when you were a child? As you know, I adopted, I'm bad. I'm not good enough, right?
Yeah.
I'm trash. That was reinforced. Yeah. So if my hardware is, I'm bad, I'm not good enough, and I'm trash, of course, the filter I see the world is going to be filtered through that lens. Then I attract people, throw me away like trash, discard me. I'm not important to them. Anything that goes wrong, it's my fault. I'm bad. I become a caretaker, have codependent relationships. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
just sets us up for disaster. If we had emotional intelligent classes, imagine that in schools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we only allow in the people and experiences that are reinforcing that unconscious belief about ourselves. And it's so unconscious that we're not really even aware of why this is happening outside of us, because we're not aware of what's going on actually at that really deep unconscious level, because it was formed at such a young age before we
Right.
really knew what was happening.
I was thinking when I was reading your book, I was struck by the how positive this story is, because it does result in a kind of spiritual awakening, and that there is a through line through that adverse childhood experience to a blossoming, like a lotus flower in a pond, in a pond of mucky goo. And I was thinking about, okay, so my grandmother's sister is murdered by her husband in a drunken fight, and she spends the next 10 years completely depressed and ignoring her children, and they all grew up to be addicts and drug abusers and violent offenders themselves and incarcerated. You know, I I am a coke baby. And then that, but there was this moment where, in very similar to your story, your mom was interested in very different modalities of let's call it spiritual development, and so was my mom. And I was like, I was watching these two parallels of trailer trash, and then this development. Like, my mom was very interested in different stuff, and then I became a yoga teacher, and it transformed my whole experience. And all of that stuff was necessary to that narrative. And I wonder, like, I'm just like, your mom fascinates me. Like, she's a kind of, like, I was thinking of that moment where she was diagnosed manic depressive, which made sense to me when I finally got to it. It's like, I think this lady's struggling. Like, why is she's married to your dad, who is a habitual violent offender and an alcoholic, but why does she stay there? Why does she leave Marvin to be with your dad, who seemed like a real nice guy, until he went bad and murdered a bunch of people? And then and then you know your mom's bringing home these kind of amazing books, and I'm just kind of really fascinated by that, at the same time that I'm horrified that she would, you know,
Make certain choices.
bring a shotgun
Yeah.
to you and your brother's head, like it's just like insane, but like
Yeah.
also resulted in you taking a very different spiritual path.
Yeah, because I believe the soul's pod, we contract with one another. My contract with my mom, I could view my mother as maybe even an enlightened being that, she made a choice in this lifetime to show up in kind of deplorable ways to push me towards the light. Who knows? It's all a great mystery, right? But
Mm-hmm.
certainly Dr. Simon, Deepak's partner, is a neurologist at the Chopra Center. When I worked with him, he asked me, he's the one who really helped me illuminate. I still had wounds around my mother going in hospitals and having electroconvulsive therapy.
Yeah.
And the electroconvulsive therapy, because of Hollywood and everything, it's just seen as such a, oh my God, crazy, one flew over the cuckoo's nest.
Right.
And so I would literally shake internally, like, memory without emotional charge is wisdom. Well, I was still having a lot of emotional charge. I hadn't extracted the wisdom, and it
Yeah.
was still very painful. And so he said, how would your mom behave when she came home? Because electroshock treatment is still done, Jana, today. It helps rewire people's brains that are clinically depressed. And he's like, your mother's brain was being rewired. There had to be something positive from it. And I
Mm.
began to put two and two together. I was like, oh, that's during the time we would read the Bible from front to cover and have studies. Or she would bring a book from Raymond Moody or or Edgar Casey, or astrology, or she brought I started meditating when I was like 7 or 8, because she had that first stint in the hospital. Somebody gave her a 33 vinyl album of meditation.
No,
And so
amazing.
it was really, yeah, so she would go into these altered states. He said her brain would get rewired. But of course, if she couldn't sustain it with the environment, she went back to the same environment. She would, and my mom, humans are complicated, and it's not so black and white, right? It's like
Mhm.
mom loved fiercely. Like I'm a heart math facilitator.
Nice.
In high school, my mom would take us heart to heart, left side to left side. We would have to breathe till we got coherent. And she would do this, my brother and I, if we fought or with her, and she would say, just close your eyes and feel the love. So we would start to entrain in this field, this coherent field of love. I mean, she had, she was an amazing, even in her last year, which was last year,
Oh.
here she is, late stage Alzheimer's. She's
No.
dying, never forgot me or my brother.
No.
Never. Always knew that she would say, you belong to me. Or um, she would
That's
sing, you are my sunshine,
Oh, yeah.
which was a big thing throughout my life, that she would
Yeah.
sing to me. And, I laid in her arms on her deathbed, and we watched old Westerns, and
amazing.
I said
Yeah.
goodbye to her. And the book couldn't really get written until I had a lot of healing. There was another whole layer of healing with my mom and my brother, who I kept trying to codependently rescue.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
kept trying to, he became a drug addict, and, he got off of it, meth, but, it was tough in the early 2000s, and she turned on me, he turned on me. I was doing everything, but I was still abandoning little Jana, trying to save my mom and brother.
Hmm.
Yeah, it brings up such a powerful example, I think, too, because even with all of the work that you'd already done on
Yeah.
yourself and the healing, and there's still like deeper aspects of ourselves, right? Deeper wounds, deeper healing that we
For
have
sure.
to, yeah, go to. And life gives us the situations, the circumstances, the people that we need to have in order to facilitate that healing. But we also have to be open to seeing that there's deeper things within ourselves that we need to be with and look at and integrate and explore, right?
Yeah,
You,
some of
you know,
my
I've,
darkest shadows were embracing, I'm crazy like my mom, or,
mm,
I'm my dad, he never worked honestly. He was a con. I remember doing
Yeah.
shadow work I trained with Debbie Ford, and I would do, I'm a con just like my dad.
mm,
All
Yeah.
the things that we deplore about our parents. I mean, let's
Yeah.
face it, every quality that exists on the planet has a potential to exist within us. For us to deny that and say, I'm not that, a pedophile or a murderer, we all have the
Yeah.
potential to be anything and everything, right? Given
Mm-hmm.
this a
yeah.
circumstance.
Yeah.
So
I was
compassion comes, I think, when you just embrace it, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I was
Yeah.
I was having this conversation in counseling one day, and I was recounting for the 100th time my family's story, and I always kind of carry with it a kind of sense of pride,
Mm.
and I was talking about them, being professional drug dealers, and my mom knew Ken Kesey back in the Chicago in the 60s, and he had been over to the house, and she'd always described him as just one of the filthiest people she'd ever met. And
Who is that?
the guy who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest,
Oh, okay.
and and I, they both were incarcerated, and I had pride in that story, the glamorousness of it, and I was reading, the second chapter in your book about how your father was a professional Elvis impersonator. You'd grown up in been conceived in Vegas, and they had this wild time, incredibly glamorous. But I think, like with Elvis himself, it kind of destroyed them. And I think that was the same for my parents. All that the glamour and the excitement destroyed their lives, though they still kind of managed to muddle through to this day. I was just really entranced by that piece of your father's development and the arc of his story, and bizarrely ended up with Elvis inviting you up to be in his suite with him. And I thought that was an amazing moment in your life where you couldn't actually go up there because you had peed your pants during his concert, and you were too embarrassed to get out of the car because you were like stained with urine. And I was like, that is the most beautiful moment that I'd read so far in the book. It was it's an incredible story.
It really is. I mean, and you're probably not there yet, but later you'll find out. Our trailer got burnt down, so my tickets, the scarf, everything got burned. Yeah,
No, he gave
so
you a scarf.
he gave us
Oh,
a blue silk scarf. Yeah, I'm glad I didn't go up there because he died a few years later, and he was a demigod, of course, in our life and the lives of
yeah.
many of us in the world. But certainly for us, I wonder too if I didn't manifest that, because I spent a lot of time again in my imaginary world imagining, my dad looked a lot like him, the hair
Mm-hmm.
push over and the just that
Yeah.
kind of like curled up lip, and he could
Yeah.
The
sing like
swagger.
him. And yeah, a lot of swagger, like really very Southern. And dad, the story on Vegas, and hearing it throughout my life, of course, glamorized Vegas. I love Vegas. I still like to go. My husband and I go a lot for our anniversary. We're going
Yeah.
soon in a couple of weeks. But, Vegas to me showed the potential that here's a couple. They're beautiful. They've got their whole life in front of them. They could have done anything. Mom was a bookworm. My mom didn't
Mm-hmm.
drink, and my mom didn't do any drugs or anything. I mean, she was a goody two shoes. Her mental illness, the time that you mentioned around the gun incident, she was in a blackout. You'll
Mm-hmm.
find that information out later when I confront her as an adult about that incident.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
didn't know it at the time. Of course, I was just a child, but she was on Valium and drank, and she never drank. So
Mm-hmm.
she
Mhm.
wasn't really aware of what she was doing.
Mhm.
But it was still pretty traumatic. And Marvin, you mentioned him. So Marvin and I still stay in touch. He is
Oh,
life
he's
in
not
prison.
in prison.
Yeah, he's life in prison in
Oh, he's
Florida.
still in prison. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah, life. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it was around 1996, I connected with him, and he was a meditation teacher. He was teaching meditation in the prison. It was certainly his karma to be in prison. He is a
Wow.
beacon of light to a lot of prisoners. He's a very intelligent man. He
Yeah.
just, made some bad choices.
I was so surprised to see you intimated that it was your mom's influence on him that made him go south. And I
Maybe go
was like,
south.
Yeah.
wow, he murdered a couple of people. That's a lot to put on your mom.
The first one. So he leaves the house in
Yeah.
Yeah.
a very,
A rage.
emotionally distraught state. Yeah. And
Yeah.
goes to a bar. He's a big guy, 6'5".
Wow.
He's like
Oh,
200 and something pounds. He's a big man. And
Mhm.
so a lot of times men would you would think they would leave him alone, but they would try
but
to
they
get him
don't.
to get in
Yeah.
a fight. And he was very calm and quiet. And I guess, he's in a state of, sadness. He goes out to his car. He gets a club, and he hits the guy and knocks the guy out, and the guy dies.
Yeah.
So it was involuntary, or it was something voluntarily manslaughter.
Right.
He
Yeah.
got out of that after 6 years, but prison made him an inmate, made him a criminal, I think.
A recidivist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about how your journey kind of took this, because it sounds to me, I mean, you studied with these beautiful teachers, Amma. It sounds like you went to India to be with Amma, maybe,
Mama
or maybe
comes
that was
here,
in
so
the
we have
States. Okay.
an ashram here. Yeah.
Yeah. But you've traveled to India and you've dove into meditation and yoga and spiritual practices. Was that, but it also sounds like you had a daughter quite young and you were in school and training to be a hypnotherapist and psychology. And so tell us a little bit about your journey, how you ended up being,
How does this possibly
yeah,
happen?
who you
Yeah.
are today.
So my 20s, I'm working really hard. I'm breaking the cycle, confronting the past, confronting my
Yeah.
mother. Really delved into Course in Miracles and metaphysics
Mm,
through Unity Church. My
yeah.
minister at Unity Church is who taught me about false beliefs. So I was really just, that was my only focus. When I say only, like I raised my daughter, I went to work. I would go to sleep at night with Walkman headset on, with cassettes telling me I am good, I am lovable, I am
Mm.
deserving. I just
Yeah.
rewire, rewire, rewire. So I was very focused on that. And of course, then the mentors and people would show up in my life. One was a man named William Wall. And, I just had these wise elderly people that would show up and present me a book or, do something that would kind of be my next morsel on the path. Then
Mhm.
once I married my ex-husband, really as an attempt, I wasn't even in love with him, to really do things differently for my daughter, put her needs first. I
Yeah.
had been a single mom for 7 years. It wasn't working out well for me. I was
Right.
Mm.
struggling. And so I made a decision to marry someone really out of probably, again, a karmic contract, because he and I are
Mhm.
still very close to this day. I love him very much, like family, but it just wasn't that romantic connection.
Mhm.
But it provided me the ability. He and I became very successful in business together, and we built a nice little empire, and I gave me the ability to afford to be able to go do all these things. So in my 30s, around 33, I just started to dive into, getting certifications, doing all the work. And then by the time I'm 36, I meet Debbie Ford, and
Yeah.
I ended up leaving Florida, moved to California for a while, worked with her. My ex-husband was partners with her. And then I ended up at the Chopra Center. Deepak had been my teacher all along. Those
Yeah.
teachings, I wouldn't even point to Deepak. It's just the teachings of Vedanta, which
Mhm.
really was like, I'm home. Like this
Yeah.
non-dualism was my path, right? Like it was
Right.
like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm home. And so, like what the Kleshas say, we suffer because we don't know the nature of true reality. And
Mhm.
Patanjali, the creator of the Yoga Sutra, said, that is the most important thing, more than the other. Y'all talked about Buddhism. Buddhism was birthed out of the Vedas, right? It was,
Mhm.
Hmm.
so it's, there's five kleshas. You don't know the nature of true reality. You identify with your false sense of self, your ego, right?
Mhm.
You're attached, you have
Mhm.
aversions, and you fear death. And the most
Yeah.
important is you don't know who you are. And I feel like when we don't know who we are, we go into existential crisis, whether that's what we're seeing in the world today, where people don't know who they are. They don't
Yeah.
know what to identify with. Today is different than tomorrow because they don't know their God. They don't know that they are not, like Rumi said, you're not just a drop in the ocean, you're the entire ocean in the drop.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so beautiful. And I love, I mean, some people might not know about Debbie Ford or who Debbie Ford is, but she's like a powerhouse in shadow work and integrating, the darker sides of ourself, right? Like not being afraid. Did she influence your own work around the inner child quite a
Yeah.
bit?
We've talked about spiritual bypassing. I mean, up until that point, Harmony, I would be, I'm doing all this work, but it was like I kept putting pink paint over my shit, or,
Right.
like
Hmm.
Yeah.
I wasn't really, I was still not addressing my anger of my
Yeah.
childhood, my
Yeah.
anger of, being a victim of the things that had happened as a child. I mean, I still had in my 30s, I would rage a lot, and I
Mhm.
would become my father. And her work, I heard her speak at I think it was either Omega or Hay House, had an event in Miami, and she came out on stage. I hadn't heard of her. And she said, "Hi, I'm Debbie Ford and I'm a bitch." And I was like, it's like, we're at a
Yeah.
spiritual conference here. Like, I
Yeah.
kind of like this though, because I am too, but I'm trying to learn how not to be.
Yeah.
She was just like, own it, and I went down, I drank the Kool-Aid. You'll get to the
Nice.
chapter on Debbie. Debbie was a complicated person, as many teachers
Yeah.
can be when they want
Yeah.
all the adoration,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
It
wow.
becomes
Yeah.
toxic. And
Yeah.
so I share about that. I got one bad review where somebody was like, "I don't think it's right. Debbie's dead and she shouldn't be able to say that." And hey, it's my experience, I
Yeah.
was very close to
Yeah.
her. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I
Well,
had to learn, right? Just like I had to, emancipate myself from a marriage that wasn't working, from, parents, from stories of who I am. I had to emancipate myself from her as well, right?
Yeah.
The,
Yeah.
the
And that's such
teacher
a
sometimes.
yeah, that's a powerful point. Because I think sometimes we go into these sort of like, a rabbit hole of practice or theory, or it's like, especially when there's a really strong personality at the head
Mhm.
of it, and we, like you say, drink the Kool-Aid, or we just fully like are immersed in this culture, and everything we're thinking and doing and feeling is coming from this culture, and it's really helping in a lot of ways. But then at a certain point, instead of it helping, it almost starts to become harmful. And maybe we're experiencing like guilt or shame around not, doing the thing the correct way, or being good enough in that particular way, or whatever is coming up. And so I think it's a really powerful point that the tools and the people and the practices can be really helpful, and to like take us to a certain point, but then at a certain point we also might need to keep going
and
and not get stuck there.
we start to project onto those tools the patterns that we're
Yeah,
familiar with from childhood.
that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
It
Or
was
like the
definitely a
old patterns
cult.
come up. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a cult. It was when
Yeah.
there's one leader and everybody, bows to that person, and that person cannot be given feedback, and the playing field's not level. That's a
Yeah.
cult. I was in a cult and I got out
Yeah.
of it. And I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure it's what killed her, because if you don't do the work yourself and you're out teaching this work, I mean, one of the greatest, I think, gifts I get from clients is I expose, like I can write an expose like I wrote and share all my underbelly because I've met myself. There's not anything anyone could call me that I could say, yeah, I guess so. Sometimes I could be that. Like I've been a whore. I've been a cheater. I've been like I'm human. This is part of the human experience. And my intent in writing this book was to show people you have nothing to be ashamed of. It's you that's creating the narrative that makes you feel ashamed, right?
Yeah.
And
Oh,
to
that's
your
so
point, Harmony, going
that's
back
so
though, I
powerful.
just want to make this last point about following a teacher, right? Following the
Yeah.
teachings. Deepak would always say, if someone's pointing to the moon, don't worship the finger.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so
Yeah.
my experience with Deepak and Dr. Simon and the Chopra Center was vastly different than my
Mm.
experience with the Ford Institute.
Yeah.
At the Chopra Center, there was no idolization. There was none of that was acceptable. If you did that, it was shot down fast. No
Mm.
fawning, no
Yeah.
picture taking, no autographs, no, you know, trying to suck up to the teacher. It was no. It's like, and
Yeah.
you'll get to the point where I see Deepak at the airport after we had done this filming, and I'm chatting with him, and he's heading to Boston. I'm heading to Florida. And the coolest thing happened. I was wanting to ask this question. I want to go back to Santa Fe because I had only been here a short time, and then I moved to California to work with Debbie and then with him. But I was like, I don't want to be there anymore. I want to be back where my heart feels at home, which is here in the mountains. I felt my soul called me here. And so I was going to ask him, like, I feel like it's time for me to leave the Chopra Center. Like, do you have any advice? Like, can you give me any? before I asked the question,
Hmm.
before I could even articulate it. It's just in my mind. He's standing in Starbucks. I walk over to him. I said, "Hey, I wanted to ask you something." Now I know he's not one to weigh in on somebody else's life or whatever, so I was feeling a little nervous about asking anyway. But he's stirring his coffee. He looks up at me, doesn't let me ask the question. And he says, "Jana, we're on the same plane." And he walked away. So I go to my husband and I'm like, he knows that we're going to Florida, not Boston. Why would he say we're on the same plane? And he didn't let me ask my question. And so I sat with it and sat with it. And finally, Spirit said, he's telling you plain, like, you're doing
Right.
your
Of
work in the world.
existence.
Yeah, like, I'm not here and you're here. We are doing it. Like, go do it. It's
Yeah.
like he
Yeah.
knew the question I was going to ask before I asked, which is often the case with teachers, right? You get
Yeah.
that very close symbiotic connection. And
Yeah.
What
That's so
year was
beautiful.
this that you were in the Starbucks, the teapot?
that was 2008.
Okay. I was wondering because I was in a foundation that was based out of Carlsbad, and the people who were in charge of the foundation, I was like their gopher, but they were very connected, and so they knew Louise Hay well, and I got to meet her, and they knew Deepak really well, and I was brought to his house once for a fundraiser, and he was there in the house, in his own house, of course. And I was just wondering if we had rubbed elbows at a party. General Wesley Clark was there, and I was just wondering if we were there at the same time. But
I wasn't, yeah.
I don't think the years are right. This is like more like 2012, 2011. And
Okay.
but what I was really struck by with him is how modest he is in person. That even in his own home, he didn't present like a prince or a king. He kind of was just kind of very mousy, kind of going around his home trying to avoid being the center of attention.
Yeah.
And I remember being really struck by that and like, why is he so mousy in his own house? But you describing this now, just yeah, that's a real kind of point of it's a
Insight.
insight
Mhm.
that he does not want to be above others. He
Or to
wants
be
to
the
be on the
center of
same
attention.
plane as others. It's
Yeah,
really
like one time
special.
I was with him and there was a teacher and she asked him could they take a picture after his talk. And he got really agitated because we're told to, like, don't mess with
Mhm.
him, give him space, like,
Hmm.
and of course that you shouldn't have to be told that. It should be intuitive, like, right, like it. But
Hmm.
they would let us know, so this person knew that. But she went for it, so good for her. I remember thinking like, oh gosh, wonder how that's going to go over, because you tell he was agitated. So then he
Hmm.
finishes. It was Larry. India had been bombed, and Larry King calls him in the middle of this talk, and he's got to leave. And so there's kind of some chaos going on. Jumps up, he's grabbing his stuff, and he looks over at me and he goes, "Jana, let's take a picture." Well, I had really bad hair that day. The picture's on my website. It's the only picture I have of me and Deepak, because I
That's
never asked
amazing.
because I didn't care, So and he looks at that lady and he just walks off. And I thought, oh, okay, he really made a point there. So
Wow.
yeah, he was
Yeah,
funny like that.
yeah, and I like that like also you're, pointing to the difference. I mean, I think there is a real danger with these spiritual groups, or of every nature and every kind, whether they're,
Every group.
yeah, every group
Yeah.
maybe, but of when the leader really like feels entitled to, like, there's something really special about them,
Yeah.
and putting themselves up on this plateau
Pedestal.
or
And
pedestal
once they
Yeah.
as,
start putting pictures of themselves up around the room,
yeah, it's
it's
a little narcissistic, right? It can
yeah,
really feed into, again,
it's
this,
entirely narcissistic.
yeah, this
It
pattern,
is.
which I mean, from like a very compassionate perspective, is like not going in and doing that deeper healing, right? Not going in and addressing like the child that never got attention.
Why do you need attention so much that you would put pictures of yourself up around the room?
Or
well, I have pictures of little Jana around the room.
I think that's beautiful.
I keep her close because I always want to, talk to myself. I even have clients like put their picture. I have mine on my screensaver of my phone. Yeah. So just always connecting with that little girl, and because that's our feeling self, right? And really loving her.
Well, I wonder if you can describe the moment where you decided, and I think it was in a moment of crisis, where you decided, I need to write this book. And I think maybe you were in a moment of meditation. Maybe the crisis was when you had to leave Esalen. Maybe those are different moments. But I wonder if you can talk about where you were in life where you said, I need to write about this little Jana.
I started in probably like 1998. And I just started to dump stories, in a file. And I had, and probably like 2008, 2017, I met a ghostwriter, and she was like, I can help you write your book and stuff. Well, they're very expensive, right? It's like $1 a word, and a typical book's about 75,000 words. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not doing that. I said, I've written a lot of my work. I just need like a developmental editor. And I couldn't find anybody. I just couldn't, it just timing. That's what it comes down to, like everything in life, right? So I come out of meditation last year. It was like around February of 2022. And I heard it really clear. It's time to write the book. And I got on the computer. I was like, okay, well then if it's time, then you make it easy. It needs to be effortless. And I found a website called Reedsy, Reedsy. And it's out of London, and it was just all these creatives from big 5 publishing houses, right? Like, and I had some connections, but it never really led me to a really great connection with someone. I found somebody, a developmental editor, who her experience was in trauma and telling stories of trauma. And so she was the perfect fit. She was in Nashville. We signed a contract. We started working together, and she kept me on task, she said, it'll be done in 6 months. And I was like, oh, no, I can't do it in 6 months, but we got it finished in 9, which I figure, okay, gave birth in 9 months. And it was a lot. It was a lot of, I thought, oh, this is going to be easy. I've already shared these stories. I'm very intimate with it, but I still had another layer of healing. Some of it would come up, and I would have to take, space from the book and the stories for a while. I'm getting ready to go in the studio to record the Audible. And, so I've been practicing, saying my dad's, voice and the curse words and all the things he, because you've got to act it out.
You don't hold back with the naughty words, do you?
Oh, yeah.
That's like a whole other kind of.
The one thing my dad would always say to my mom was horrible. I don't think I put that in the book either, because
the C word is bad enough.
Yeah, that was the worst, obviously.
Yeah.
He definitely had a mouth on him.
I don't know if you want to talk about this and we can cut this out, but I was left with the impression that your father not only physically abused you, but went a bit further than that.
He did. And later in the book, I'll circle back to that.
You do, yeah. I was getting the idea that it wasn't normal for a daughter to be so averse to her father's presence in every situation.
Well, even just, sexualizing me and having me dance on tables for drunk men. That's enough, But there was definitely something more. I began to act out at a young age, and so it was definitely pointing to something beyond my memory. I don't remember it.
Still today.
So my mom confirmed it, and I had the memory in hypnotherapy. When I
Yeah.
confronted her about the memory in hypnotherapy, she confirmed it. She said, that he would do changing my diapers. She would find him, touching me inappropriately, and then of course I'm probably getting a message because even, we know intergenerational trauma
Yeah.
exists because of the rat studies, right? They've done where they've taken the rats, and the babies of the rats behaved the same way the parents of the rats behaved, even though they weren't shocked, in those research
Right.
studies. So intergenerational, definitely that was there, but also precognitive and preconscious trauma, right? We don't talk a lot about, but you take a mother just like you had, and she's on drugs. Well, of course, we know that's affecting the fetus, right? You're
Sure.
totally being affected. But
I'm
what
doing
about her
16
emotional
lines a
state?
day, Jana.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah. 10 pounds, 16 lines. It's a lot.
Wow. Yeah, but take away any kind of substance, and the body's creating the substance, right? It's creating the cortisol, and the adrenaline, noradrenaline is getting flooded into that growing fetus, and of course it's in a state of fight or flight and stress response. Because we're sentient beings, right? We don't know really when the soul inhabits the body, or the consciousness, right, inhabits the body, but I would say we're conscious, and I was
Yeah.
conscious in the womb, and I didn't want to be born. That's why I wrapped the cord
Right.
right around my neck and breached, because it makes sense.
Don't
I
want to
never
do
knew
it.
I did that, yeah, until I did hypnotherapy. For me, becoming a hypnotherapist and going through hypnotherapy has been a game changer, and for clients as well. A lot of them say, I don't have memory of childhood. Is if I create safety and trust, and my voice and everything, and I can induce them and get them in a relaxed state, it pops. It's there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the thing, when they see for themselves what the child endured and the decisions the child made about themselves at certain times.
Yeah.
I had one lady, my parents were great. They're still married. Nothing bad happened. I'm just unhappy. My husband never listens to me. My kids don't listen to me. I feel like my feelings don't matter. Okay. Go through hypnotherapy. 5 years old. She's at a lake. She wants to go swimming, but she's scared. They're telling her it's fine. She can't see the bottom of the lake. She's only been in a swimming pool to that point in her life. Rather than listening and honoring her, they forced her in the water. In the moment of being forced in the water at 5, it's so traumatic. She thinks she's going to die. So she determines in that moment, she identifies something's happened. This is what it means, right? And her meaning was, my feelings don't matter. Well, no
Yeah. And then
wonder she doesn't think her husband, her feelings don't matter to anybody, because at 5 years old, she solidified other people know better. So she was very passive aggressive, like all the personality traits of someone who doesn't really own their voice, and, a lot of chakra, talking like a baby a little, like, the voice coming through, and very wishy-washy and not strong in her voice. Totally changed her life, because then she was like, oh, my feelings do matter, and I've been the one. It starts with me saying my feelings. I need to learn to love and listen to myself, and teach other people to do it. So it was radically changed her life.
Yeah, that's amazing.
What I love about this book that's very different from just a memoir is this Wise Little One, this book that you've made, Learning to Love and Listen to My Inner Child, is that it's a prescriptive memoir, which is such an unusual thing to hear, and that each chapter ends with this little tab
Exercise.
where you talk about what's happening at a meta level in this story that you've told in this chapter. And so you'll talk, like, for example, just, opening up to a random page about Vegas in 1963. And at the end of the chapter, you talk about codependency and what that does and how that affected your parents. And so each little chapter has this beautiful little ending
Like a
where
lesson.
a lesson Yeah, like an Aesop fable. There's a moral to the story, and this is what we're going to talk about now. And then, emotionally intelligent children after the chapter Soul Slap in 1977. And so it's really it's really very novel and gorgeous. How did you come up with that idea?
So when I was interviewing the developmental editors, I spoke to the first one that I didn't hire, and she said, "Oh, you want to write prescriptive nonfiction?" And I was like, "What do you mean prescriptive? I've never heard that terminology." She said, "Well, in the industry, nonfiction self-help is prescriptive nonfiction, but you're writing a memoir that's prescriptive memoir." And I was like, "I've never
Mm.
heard that before." She goes, "Because you won't. It's just kind of an insider thing."
Right.
So I write the book, and it has on the cover, it only had a memoir.
Oh,
The
yeah.
first
Beautiful.
draft.
Yeah.
And so I went back and I added prescriptive memoir, and I
Yeah.
added 11. There's only 11. It's not every chapter where you're
I
seeing.
see. Yeah,
I
okay.
added 11, and it was a download from Spirit. I got feedback when the book, because it takes about 6 months to launch a book after it's written.
Mm-hmm.
Because there has to be publicity, there has to be,
Yeah.
podcasts, interviews. I did, certain book articles, things like that, right? Like
Yeah.
local news station interviewed, like, it's like a movie, right? You don't just
Yeah.
throw
You
it out.
have to.
Yeah,
And
that's
You
right.
have to
because
get out there and promote.
Promotion tour.
build the excitement so that when it
Yeah.
launches, there's some kind of momentum. And I've been proud
Yeah.
of it. It's stayed in new releases in the top 10 for a month in inner
Wow.
child self-help. So that's pretty remarkable.
Fantastic.
One, because I'm not a celebrity. Two, because I published it myself, my company,
Wow.
EHS,
Amazing.
right?
Yeah.
Emotional
Mhm.
Healing Systems. So I created a publishing, subsidiary to my corporation just because. But
Yeah.
to answer your question, thank you so much for saying that, because to me, some of the feedback I got in these galleys where people, just general public, librarians and things, are reading the book, was I was hoping there was going to be more info for me to digest. It felt like one lady said, "Well, yeah, I see she's founder of Emotional Healing Systems. Is she just writing this to get me to go to her event?" Well, yes, I have no shame in saying that. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I
Yeah.
mean, and then two, but I listened and I sat with it, and underneath I heard, that people are reading it and there's a desire. Well, how can I do this? They aren't savvy like you and I are. They aren't yogis. They aren't on their path. So they
Yeah.
need it clearly written out, right? Like I felt
Right.
like I did it in the chapter, but not enough.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
needed
Sure.
to be spoke to. So this book,
More
I think, is a
explicit.
one of a kind. I don't think there's
Yeah.
any prescriptive memoirs out there where you're going to see these little
Yeah.
snippets of teaching, because it's
Mhm.
kind of crossing over from self-help
Yeah.
to memoir. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. And I'd love to hear, tell us a little bit about the emotional healing system that you've created and developed and teach.
Yeah. So in 2000, when I finished working with Debbie and I left the Chopra Center and I moved back to Santa Fe, I was still doing predominantly phone work. So I was trained in integrative coaching. So I
Mhm.
was doing like shadow work with clients once a
Yeah.
week, and I got very burnout. 7 years of I was still doing group retreats at that time, but
Mhm.
like as we grow and evolve, everything else kind of evolves as well. So
Yeah.
I said, it's time to stop and really get clear. What is my brand? Who am I? What am I doing? So I hired some really great branding expert. He had spent time in an ashram. He was very spiritual. So he was like my guy. He got me
Yeah.
and he got
Yeah.
my work. And he came up with the name Emotional Healing Systems after interviewing me for a full day and working with me to really understand, what do I do? I guess I kept
Mm.
saying something about emotional healing, emotional healing. Well, back in
Mhm.
2009, 2010, that wasn't being Googled too much. It wasn't
Right.
overused. It was keywords that were perfect. So we went with it, and within 3 years of doing that, my website, I mean, now it gets about, 25,000 hits a month.
Wow.
I never do ads or anything.
Wow.
Amazing.
Just from those keywords. So we had, we started a teacher training. I've been doing that. So people who work with me, who fall in love with the work, we teach them. But the system is just, it's psychospirituality. So foundations, consciousness is everything. Well, how do we expand consciousness? Y'all know, meditation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being in nature, really connecting to the divine, the divinity within. And so the spiritual foundation component, which is very, to me, I'm most passionate about that. But for the average person, it's way over their head.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They have every excuse, right? Why they can't meditate, why they can't. Anyway.
Because
So
the mind and body are separate, they tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
They're also very busy.
Let's start from the beginning. Okay.
Yeah. So foundation is consciousness is everything. So we spend time on that. Like the retreat that's coming up, we'll take them through this entire system. And private clients, of course, we do as well. We just take a deeper dive because it's just us and them. But my husband's really into epigenetics and neuroplasticity and a lot of the science part. So I think as a physician, he really complements that.
Yeah.
You haven't got to the part in the book where I meet him.
No, I haven't.
The story, I get guided to leave Esalen, right? I'm in that meditation retreat with Sally Kempton, my teacher. She just passed away.
Yeah.
Bless her soul.
Bless her.
Well, we don't die, right? We're just off to the next great adventure. So I was with her and I kept getting that hit to leave. And anyway, I get on a plane, not to give the story away, but that's how I met my husband. Leaving that retreat. Yeah.
Amazing.
That's a happy ending.
Oh, it's a very happy ending. Yeah. Wait till you get there. And so anyway, the system is consciousness. Then we start to construct the psyche for someone. So they understand that it's psychosynthesis. If you're familiar with it, it's parts therapy. I'm one person, but I'm a 360-degree personality. So I have light and dark. So it incorporates shadow. So we teach and then we take them through the experience. Mm-hmm. Because it's not enough. Knowledge isn't enough, right? They have to have the experience for it to start to rewire the brain. So it's pretty deep. We do a lot of mirror work, like what I said to you before, I'm a con just like my dad. I'm crazy just like my mom. It's facing a lot of the dark things we say to ourselves internally and bringing light to it. And also the light. I am divine. I'm a goddess. I'm amazing. I'm beautiful. I'm brilliant. These are harder for people to say than the dark.
Yeah.
Interestingly, it is. Yeah. And then we get them to the reparenting, which is 3 steps, connecting to spiritual guidance, leaning into discomfort, the feelings, identifying core from wounded feelings, pain from suffering. Yeah. Pain is can't get out of life without pain, right? Somebody dies, you're going to grieve. But if someone dies, say they took their life and you tell yourself a story, you were responsible for it, then that creates suffering, right? It's the narrative that creates the suffering. So people learn how to extract, is this a feeling that's truly painful because something's happening? Or is this a feeling that's happening because I'm creating a story about something that's happened? Right? Or hasn't even happened. I mean, we're great storytellers, humans, so we create all kinds of stories. Yeah. And then we kind of finish it off with we do breath work, of course. That's a big part of it. Yoga. I trained with Saul David Ray and Atma Yoga. So I do a lot of gentle and somatic movements, to help people process feeling in the body. And then at the end of it, it's all envisioning. So it's, sometimes I'll do advanced meditation like Mahavakyas, where I'm taking them, into like a deeper state to envision the future, to work with the field. A lot of Joe Dispenza. I met Joe in 2004 at What the Bleep conference. I supported him before he wrote books or anything. So it's really a lot of Deepak's teaching too, the Vedic teaching.
Yeah.
And is what he's teaching. And so we just using that to teach people to become supernatural. You are the creator of your life. And my husband and I are actually writing the book now. So the Emotional Healing System, a practical guide, to healing. And I don't know, we haven't come up with a subtitle, but we are working on it. It should be out by the end of the year, or it should be finished.
Amazing.
Well,
awesome.
I just want to say again that in reading the book, I was just struck by how much we had in common, and it felt like I grew up with you, and I felt like not knowing you from Adam. Reading the book was like, I think this might be a lost sister
or cousin,
or a cousin, someone who definitely is a member of my family, and it's just, it gives me an enormous hope, though you would prefer faith. I know
trust.
I know you would prefer the term faith rather than hope, but it gives me enormous trust that there are other crackers out there like me who are on the same path and figuring it out. And it's really been a real pleasure to get to know you and to meet you, and thank you for sending us your book. It is a special read. And
thank you. That it means a lot because you're a man. Because I felt like my teacher, David G. read the book, and I think he gave me one of the best reviews because he gets it, right? But I've felt kind of like a lot of my male clients or men, it might not be that, for them. My husband's like, the book's great. Like somebody's going to, anybody, it doesn't matter. Right. Especially if they're conscious and they get what your intent is. But so thank you so much. I receive it and I appreciate it very much.
It made me want to tell you I know I seeded it into the conversation, but it made me want to tell you all about what happened to us.
Your trauma.
And
my trauma, my story.
I want Harmony to tell you her stuff too. There's great stuff we want to tell you now, but anyway, that's for
you
another.
Can make an appointment.
That's another story. But thank you.
I would love to come back on once Emotional Healing System book comes out.
That'd be great. That would be fantastic. Let us know when it comes out.
I'm so into everything that you said about your emotional healing system.
And where can people find Wise Little One right now? And if they want to have a good read.
Yeah, so obviously Amazon has a lion's share of book sales, so definitely Amazon. Somebody wanted a copy. I've got these really beautiful, I just got these in. I mean, memoir is not a book that you normally write, like for hardcover, But I was like, I gotta have a hardcover of my book,
Totally.
So people can go to my website, Jana Wilson, and I'll mail it to them and sign it, or
Okay.
Amazing.
But Amazon's probably the best, but it is available everywhere. Local bookstores can order it, Barnes and Noble. Yeah, and it's Kindle and ebook, and then I have a
Audible.
I would like a signed copy. I want this not for resale copy signed. That's the one I want. That's the special one.
You do?
I want this not for resale signed. So we're going to come find you in Santa Fe, and we're going to get this book signed. That'd be nice.
Yeah, or come to Florida.
Oh yeah?
Is that where your retreat will be?
Yeah, come. You guys can be our VIP guest.
Oh, amazing.
Alrighty. And then it's not anywhere near Orlando, is it? Because that's...
it's about an hour and a half.
We can get there.
So people can... Amazing. Right. People can find out about your retreats and how to work with you on your website as well, right?
Yeah.
That's the best place.
On janawilson.com, it says work with Jana. If you click on it, it'll take you to emotionalhealingretreats.com.
Wonderful.
Okay. And emotionalhealingretreats.com is my main. Yeah, it's time. The time is now to have a happy childhood.
Oh, I love it. The time is now to have a happy childhood.
I usually have this. It's never too late, but I don't like never and too late. I'm a stickler for languaging.
Yeah.
And so the brain doesn't hear it. It just hears it's too late to have a happy childhood. Never. So when I was doing the website, I told my husband, I think we're going to say now is the time to have a happy challenge.
Yeah.
So we put
Now,
all the
be
negative language
here. Be
Yeah, that's
here
now.
good.
now.
Be here
Now.
now.
Yeah.
I
You
love
guys were a
it.
pleasure. Thank y'all for
Oh,
having me.
Thank you.
thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Finding Harmony with me, your host, Harmony Slater. You can find out more information on my website, harmonyslater.com, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Standing in eternity's shadow, watching the breaking waves. There's a heart